G'day guys, it is Rossco here from Third Man Up, and today I am bringing you my Round 7 Game Day Squad team reveal for both Starter and Classic, and a bit of a run through on why I've sort of made some of these selections, and a bit of an insight possibly into some new posts you might be seeing on the regular on Third Man Up with regards to Game Day Squad. So, as you can see here, I've got my Starter Squad fired up and ready to go. Last week, we finished 69th with a total of 2,359 points. And I believe that was about 300 or so points off number one, which is not too bad. I'm really obviously enjoying Game Day Squad. I've started to get some of the better players in bronze and silver formats. And I think it's really setting me up now to go hard for the rest of the season and pick some really, really sort of dominant squads to hopefully really climb that leaderboard. Now, before I get into the team reveal, I just wanted to make sure you guys all know to use that code PEANUT there and verify your account for $20 worth of free packs. It helps the Game Day Squad boys keep everything above board, and it helps you guys to be able to withdraw any winnings that you guys may earn through playing Game Day Squad as well. So, without further ado, let's get into the video and let's start with the defenders. So, Dane Zorko is one that I think I'm willing to risk. Normally, we did say in the Captain's Corner video that Dane Zorko against St Kilda would be an easy VC or captaincy option. He has been a little bit out of form, but in terms of Game Day Squad, it doesn't really consider his statistical efficiency or anything like that into account. It sort of just gives an even weight per kick, per handball, per mark. And as you can see, he still scored 98 despite having a really, really poor game. And I think that sort of really helps him. If we go into his stats here, well, no, that's not stats. So he's got the potential there to get those 138, 153, 145. His last three haven't been amazing here, but we just need to see a little bit of a boost in the marks, a couple of frees, not so many free kicks against, and hopefully we can see Dane Zorko back to his best. Now, moving on to my beloved Saints boys, Wanganeen, Miller and Sinclair. Down week for us last week playing the Bulldogs. And again, both of them still nearly got to 100. We're looking for 170s, like you can see with Lachie Whitfield here. But against Brisbane, I think these guys have the opportunity on the marble deck to do really, really well. They're averaging 121.7 and 125. And this is more a case of not really playing the matchup, but more playing the reliability and the high scoring that they should be able to deliver on a consistent basis. Max Holmes is one that I really like this week, coming up against Carlton, who are somewhat of a restrictive matchup. However, I can see Geelong getting on top of Carlton a little bit this weekend, and I think that Holmes is one who'll really benefit from that. I have another Geelong player in my forward line, who I'm sure you might know who it is, but he's one that definitely will benefit from what I believe to be Geelong coming out and beating Carlton on the MCG this weekend. 91 last week, not amazing. He didn't really do much in the second half against Hawthorn. After in the first half, it looks like he was going to go ballistic. So can we get another game where he does that, but for both halves? That would be really, really ideal. Lachie Whitfield, probably the best scoring player so far, I believe, per average in Game Day Squad so far. So obviously it's a lock that he has to be in here. Playing against the Bulldogs, who are a decently restrictive matchup for designated kickers. Playing at Monaco, which I know Janet Spilsey and I touched on in the sword play potty earlier on in the week. It is a small ground, and Lachie Whitfield has struggled on the small grounds. But I think, look, I'm pretty confident to have him in. I don't really see many better options. I think on my sidelines, I might have a Nick Martin and a Jordan Clark and who else? I couldn't even tell you. But, I don't think they're good enough to displace Whitfield in the scoring form that he's in. We've got Harry Sheezel, another one who isn't exactly setting the world on fire, but these are still the best defenders in Game Day Squad. I'm willing to back him in to bounce back. They've got a really tricky matchup against Port at Adelaide Oval, but I'm bouncing him into the squad again, and I'm backing him to bounce back. Now, here's a little pod on my bench. If you're unaware, bench players do score fully. In Game Day Squad, you get the score of every one of your 22 players. I go with James Sicily. Now, they are playing the Eagles on Sunday twilight at Marvel Stadium, which is just a really, really positive matchup. Looking at some of these guys in Captain's Corner, and the Eagles are the number one easiest matchup for designated kickers, the number one easiest matchup for inside midfielders. And I think that suits Sicily really well. I don't think he'll be thrown forward as much if the game is sort of well and done by halftime against the Eagles, like I expect it should be. And I think if he just plays back, there should be plenty of ball for him. The Eagles don't really do too much of a restrictive job with their forwards. And I can just see him putting up a nice score. I'm not sure how big, but I think it should be nice enough. So here's hoping James Sicily, one of my pods this week, can go really, really well. Because if you do go for a pod in Game Day Squad, it can really help because it can boost you compared to a lot of people who don't have him. But it can also really hurt you where your pod goes 50 and the more safe selection goes 100. You've obviously dropped 50 points right there. So with that being said, let's take a look at my midfield where I think I have gone a bit extreme with the pods this week. We'll go with the rucks as well. So starting off there, Joe Newcomb. Exact same reasons as James Sicily. I'm considering captaining him in Supercoach this weekend, playing against the Eagles. Shouldn't cop a tag, and I think it's just a really good matchup for him. He's averaging 119.7, nearly 120, and I think he can go a bit bigger than that this week, so I'm happy to have him sitting there. Connor Rosie, same goes. Another positive matchup against the Kangaroos. I just think, look, playing off half-back as a midfielder in Game Day Squad, it's invaluable. He's going to score really well if he just continues to rack the ball up there. Timmy Taranto, one that's playing tonight, so I'm recording this on Thursday. He's playing a bit later on against the D's. Now, Clayton Oliver, Christian Petrarca, Ed Langdon, Jack Viney, whoever else is playing in their midfield, solid players. They're a bit below their best. They're 1 of 5, the D's. And Taranto got a bit off the chain last week in their win over the Gold Coast Suns. So he's another pod that I'm sort of looking to back in and just hope that he can explode again for another 138 against the D's tonight. Andy Brayshaw has got an okay matchup against the Crows, but he's in sublime form at the moment. In Supercoach, I know for sure he's scored his last 3 games above 120. And in Game Day Squad, he's averaging 120 as well, just like Joe Newcomb. So he's in flying form with an easy matchup or okay matchup against the Crows. I think he's one that I'm sort of willing to take. I know in the last few weeks I've had Brayshaw and Sarong, but I've chosen to take Sarong out this week at the expense of Zach Merritt. I just think that it's better to differentiate rather than have them both. And Sarong hasn't been in the greatest form anyway. But with Zach Merritt, he had a down game last week, but otherwise averaging 130 and looks to have a big game ahead of him on Anzac Day. Now, there is the factor that needs to be considered where Collingwood did a great job of clogging up the midfield last week against Brisbane. But I think Merritt can bounce back, get through that, and still put up a really nice score for us. It's a big game on Anzac Day, and he always wants to stand up as the captain of his side and get his team hopefully over the line against the Pies. So I'm backing him in for a big score. On the other side of that coin, as you can see on my bench, I've got Nick Dacos. He's just one that I didn't want to miss out on this week after I missed him last week. And being 300 or so points off the top, it really did cost me not having a 156 in there, which is obviously really disappointing. I think my lowest midfielder last week scored maybe a 70. So I already dropped 76 points or 86 points right there just from not owning Nick Dacos. Could have bumped me up into the top 50. Would have been lovely. But what can you do? I'm picking him this week. I'm hoping to avoid the same mistakes again. He's going to be captaining the Pies. I don't think Will Setterfield will tag him. I can just see it as a really, really good opportunity for him. In the wet as well, he might rack up a couple more extra tackles than normal. I just think it's a no-brainer to pick him this week. Now, moving on to my rucks, I take a Darcy Cameron. It's somewhat of a pod move, considering he only scored 91 last week. I had him in there thinking he would go really, really well, but he just didn't. This week, though, different story. Playing against Todd Goldstein, who's like 37. I just think it's a really positive situation for him. Anzac Day, playing against Goldie, who we don't know about his match conditioning. I know he was a Jet back in the day, 10 years ago, but I don't know about his match fitness and conditioning now. And, you know, say Goldstein plays a half or 3/4 and gets subbed off. Darcy Cameron should just have a field day. They should just maul them out of the ruck, Collingwood. And I think that's why I want to take him in my ruck line. Same thing goes with Maxi Gorn. Now, he went really big last week with 138, which was lovely for me, as I did drop him in. Playing against Toby Nankervis this week, tonight, I think it's a really positive matchup. I know DFS for Supercoach have Nankervis listed as the easiest ruck matchup across the last 5 weeks, and I think it was the second easiest in the last 10 weeks, which makes me think that Maxi Gorn is one where I just really don't want to leave him out. We discussed this in Captain's Corner. If you own him, you should probably get your VC on him for the game tonight, and don't miss out on having him in your game day squad. Let's take a scroll down and have a look at my starter forwards. It's more sort of mainly similar to last week, and that's probably a bit of the reason why I had a bit of a down week last week compared to being in the 50s before that. McRae, Daniel, Simpkin, and Green all struggled and did not make 100, which was a bit disappointing, a bit underwhelming, considering these are the guys who you sort of rely upon as the best scorers, the elite of the elite. But we're hoping to get a bounce back with our forwards this week. And I think Jack McRae is the perfect place to start, playing against Brisbane. A little bit of criticism in the media this week, I think. People were saying, oh, where's that Recruit of the Year talk? Why is he stinking it up now? And I think it's just been 2 bad weeks for St Kilda. We got our colours lowered by the Giants and we got pumped by the Bulldogs. I mean, yes, we could get pumped by the Brisbane Lions. I'm hoping that is seriously not the case. But I think McRae can bounce back up to that average. And if he does that, that's all we really need from him. I've got a couple of pods elsewhere that I think should do some of the heavy lifting, hopefully. Caleb Daniel, playing against Port Adelaide at Adelaide Oval, which is a tricky matchup, but he is definitely one to watch. As that sort of designated kicker, I think regardless of the matchup, who they play against every week, Daniel's always there to be sort of in and around the ball, in the back half, and playing as a forward. It's a no-brainer just to keep him in there. I've got only 2 Crows boys against Dockers, Keys and Rankin. They're both scoring really well, averaging around that 110 mark. And that's all I need from them again this week. Toby Green had a really disappointing game last week against the Crows, only managed to get to 55. Now, against the Bulldogs on Manuka Oval, a matchup that he normally does quite well in, I'm backing him in to bounce back. Bailey Smith against Carlton, averaging 133. And as you can see, that 105 is a drop-off from last week. But I can see him getting back up to that average again. Carlton shouldn't really put too much work into him. And I know they are a restrictive midfield, but Bailey Smith's running capacity, his intent to be around the ball has been really, really good this season from a fantasy perspective. And, his head's in the game. He's flipping off fans. He's smacking people in the head with the footy. He seems to just be really determined and in the zone to get Geelong over the line. And I like that. I don't necessarily agree with him smacking people in the head with a footy. That fan in Adelaide did deserve, probably after shouting some abuse, to have the bird flipped at him. But the point is, Bailey Smith, keep him in your game day squad forward lines. Now, last of all, I've gone with Jai Simpkin. I don't necessarily like the pick too much, but he is averaging better than 5 of the other 6 forwards I've just mentioned. And I think playing that midfield time, I know Wardlaw's back in. It could be a matter of this week is a make or break week for him. If he keeps that midfield time, he can probably keep scoring pretty well and he'll probably stay there. If he doesn't, then I might have to have a look at other alternatives. I've got a couple of Bulldogs boys in Kennedy and Sanders. I'm not too sure if I want to play them this week against the Giants. Could come back to bite me, but I am going to stick with Jai Simpkin in starter. Now, that's my starter team. I think it's pretty decent. I hope it's pretty decent. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And I'll just flick over to my classic team as well, because this is hopefully where I can improve on this 173rd ranking. I want to get into the top 100, top 50. I want to get a win. Shout out to anyone who's watching this in the Game Day Squad Rookie Cup, which is on your classic scoring. I think there's 12 of us, maybe 10. I'm not doing so well at the moment. I haven't won a round, but I think I've got some good acquisitions that can really help me go well this week. Going with Platinum Sinclair, Platinum Wanganeen Moira, and Silver Bowie as my sort of non-bronze cards here in defense. Bowie, a positive matchup against the Tigers, and he got 149 last week, which is quite surprising. I don't know if I'd be picking him in AFL Fantasy or Supercoach, but I think he's one who's played really positively from a game day squad perspective. Obviously, with no sort of cash restraints or price movements or anything like that. It's not so much of a risk to take him week by week in game day squad. One of the real advantages of this format compared to the other formats. And I'm willing to have him in there. Now, as I touched on before, Lockie Whitfield, he stays. I've gone with Carl Amon and James Sicily in my classic squad here. Carl Amon's one that I'm quite big on. He went really well last week distributing the ball. And I think that matchup against the Eagles is good for both of them. And then I filled in my defense here with Bailey Dale. Playing against GWS, I'm just backing the kickers to play against each other pretty well. The Giants are a tricky matchup. But to be honest with you, with all the good defenders that I own being in my starter squad, Bailey Dale's probably the best one that I could have here to fill this classic squad out. Now, into my midfield, George Hewitt, number 1 of 500. It's pretty cool that I managed to get a hold of that, number 1 of 500 here. He's a flyer. He's like probably in genuine Brownlow form, the way he's playing. He's averaging 172.9. And he scored 186 last week, which is just ridiculous. I don't know how he's doing it. Just that second cog in the Blues midfield behind Cripps, sort of in front of Chera, it's really, really helping him. And I'm really glad to own his platinum card. I could probably get a pretty penny if I chose to sell that one, especially with it being number 1. But he stays in my team. I want his points and I want to win. He's staying. Josh Dunkley, similar scenario. This week they play against my beloved Saints. Janeth and I touched on it in Captain's Corner. We think that the Marcus Wintega tag will go to Lockie Neal. And as a result, that should open up the floodgates for Josh Dunkley and Hugh McCluggage to do as they please. So Platinum Dunkley, averaging 165.5. Get him in. I'm keeping him in my midfield as well. Nick Dacos, Zach Merritt, and Jai Newcomb. I touched on all of them before. Now, I've gone with Matt Rowell to close out my midfield here. And that is purely because he is the Suns midfielder against the Swans on Sunday. I do not expect to get the Jordan tag. I think it will go to Noah Anderson, and he's been in flying form really well. We always known he's been a bit of an inside bull, but he's improved his outside game as well, Matt Rowell. And I think, he's one that I'm happy to have in there and hope that he doesn't get tagged. My rucks here are still the same. I've got Darcy Cameron and Gorm. Let's have a look at the forward line. Primarily the same as well. I've gone for a huge pod here in Corey Durden Gold now. Okay, that's my forwards I've got there. Should I play Peter Wright? I don't think I will. 1.2 times multiplier. He's averaging 94.5, but that's boosting up to 113, which is not too bad. And he's been in good form. They play against Geelong. Could he kick a couple of goals and bob up again? If he doesn't, then I'm probably going to assume he's not a reliable option. But in the form he's in, I'm willing to have a crack at him and see how he goes with that 1.2x multiplier. Horn Francis playing against North Melbourne. I've only got one of him, and they've opted to play him here, as I actually think that, it is worth the gamble to pop him in sort of here rather than in the starter squad. He could score another 125, but he could also go back to his early season form and just sort of stink it up. We've got McRae, Smith, and Keys. And last of all, we've got Matthew Kennedy, who is averaging 108.5 in game day squad since he's come over from the Blues. Pretty shrewd acquisition, if I do say so myself. Now, they play GWS, and I did touch on before that it is a tricky matchup, but I'm hoping for the best. I really want to sort of top up some of these bronzes. I'm going to be having a look with DR, having a look with Janeth, jumping in the Game Day Squad Discord to sort of get my hands on some of the bronzes that are in my starter squad as duplicates so I can field them across starter and classic formats. Because while Matt Rowell, Matthew Kennedy, Horn Francis are probably decent options, there might just be better players out there that I could be fielding. I could be fielding a Caleb Daniel, which could be a bit safer every week. Or in the midfield, I could be fielding a Tim Taranto. It just depends. It's sort of a bit of a luck of the draw with how your pods go. But I am definitely looking to stay active on the trade market. So without further ado, I think that brings me to the end of my team reveal for today. As you can see here, I've got a 51-cent bid on a certain player in the auction room. I'm hoping that in the next 2 hours when that goes off, nobody's going to be getting on him, and I might drop him in my defense for classic as well. because here's a bit of a heads up. He is a silver player, and he is a pretty decent player at that. But we'll have to see how that bidding war goes. Now, as you can see on the lovely overlay DR's put together here, once again, make sure you use that code PEANUT and verify your account to grab $20 worth of free packs. The Game Day Squad boys mentioned to us that we're getting some really, really good traction on that. You guys are getting behind it. So hopefully you're enjoying the game. Hopefully that you got something good as well from the free packs if you use that code PEANUT. I'll leave a link as well to the Game Day Squad Discord in the description, how to verify your account, all that sort of stuff, so that we're all around it. And we're ready to hopefully enjoy a huge round 7, a long weekend at that as well. So thanks for joining me today for this Game Day Squad video. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. Let me know what you think of my teams below in the comments, and I'll give you a post-round review sometime next week as well. So I'm looking forward to getting onto that as well. Cheers, guys.